In the softest whisper of fate, some secrets grow too heavy to carry alone. Some hearts beat not just for themselves, but for the innocent life they shelter. And some men are too powerful to escape, even when love demands you try. What happens when the most dangerous man you've ever loved discovers the truth you've hidden for 8 long months? What happens when a baby's heartbeat becomes the only sound that matters in a room built on lies and legacy? This is the story of Emma Carter, a woman who thought she could disappear. This is the story of Dante Castellano, a mafia boss who thought he'd lost everything. And this is the story of the tiny heartbeat caught between them, rewriting every rule they thought they knew about love, power, and redemption. Stay with me. What you're about to hear will break your heart before it heals it. Meet Emma Carter, 28 years old, 8 months pregnant, and walking straight into the heart of the storm she spent 2 years running from. She's not a victim. She's not helpless. She's a woman who chose freedom over fortune, safety over security, and her unborn daughter's future over her own fractured heart. And then there's Dante Castellano, a name whispered in Chicago's darkest corners with equal parts fear and respect. 6'3" of controlled danger wrapped in custom Italian suits. A mafia boss who inherited an empire built on blood, but who once loved a woman so completely that her absence carved a hole in his chest he couldn't fill with power, money, or revenge. Today, these two souls collide once more. And nothing, absolutely nothing, will ever be the same. Now, before we dive deeper, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Emma and Dante's story travels across this world. Let's begin. The elevator doors slid open with a whisper, that particular sound only extreme wealth can buy, where even machinery knows to stay silent and respectful. Emma Carter stood frozen in that doorway, one hand gripping her purse like a lifeline, the other instinctively moving to the swell of her belly beneath the oversized coat she'd chosen with painful precision. 8 months. The number echoed in her mind like a countdown. 8 months of hiding. 8 months of moving from city to city like a ghost in her own life. 8 months of paying for everything in cash, avoiding cameras, changing her hair, using names that weren't hers. 8 months of waking up every morning wondering if today would be the day he found her. And now here she was, walking voluntarily into his world, into his building, into the lion's den wearing a secret that would change everything. The lobby before her screamed wealth and power in every polished marble surface, every gleaming chrome fixture, every carefully positioned piece of contemporary art that probably cost more than most people earned in a decade. This was Dante's domain, a kingdom of glass and steel and shadows, where every corner had eyes and every eye reported back to him. Just sign the papers and leave, Emma told herself, forcing one foot in front of the other. Richard promised it would just be the lawyers. Dante won't even be here. He agreed to stay away. Just signatures, just legal formalities, just the end of a marriage that died the night Marco did. The baby kicked, a strong, insistent movement that made Emma's breath catch in her throat. Even her daughter seemed to sense the tension radiating through her body, the electricity in the air, the danger of this place. Ms. Carter? Emma turned to find a young woman in an immaculate suit, tablet in hand, professional smile firmly in place. She couldn't have been more than 25, but her eyes held that particular sharpness Emma recognized, the look of someone who worked for dangerous men and had learned to see everything while revealing nothing. Mr. Castellano's legal team is ready for you. 32nd floor, conference room A. Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. The woman gestured toward a private elevator bank, separate from the public lifts, because of course Dante would have his own elevators. He had his own everything, buildings, businesses, politicians, judges, police chiefs, and once, for 3 brief, beautiful, terrible years, he'd had her. The elevator ride felt both eternal and too short all at once. Emma watched the numbers climb, each floor marking her ascent into a world she'd sworn she'd never return to. 25. 28. 30. Her reflection in the polished brass showed a woman she barely recognized, thinner than she'd been despite the pregnancy, shadows under her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights, hair now darker than its natural honey brown, cut shorter, different. Would he even recognize me? She wondered, then immediately hated herself for caring. The doors opened directly into a reception area that managed to be both elegant and intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline, the late afternoon sun turning the glass towers into pillars of fire. A young man, another assistant, another pair of observant eyes, led her down a hallway lined with art that whispered of million-dollar price tags and artists whose names carried weight in auction houses around the world. "Right through here," he said, opening double doors to reveal a conference room dominated by an enormous table of dark wood that gleamed like still water. 3 people sat on the far side. 2 lawyers in expensive suits flanking an empty chair. No Dante. Emma felt her shoulders relax fractionally, felt the vice around her chest loosen just enough to draw a full breath. She could do this. She could sign the papers, accept her freedom, and disappear again before anyone was the wiser. She'd planned it all so carefully, a bus to Indianapolis leaving in 3 hours, then a train to Memphis, then another bus to a small town in Arkansas where she'd already rented a tiny apartment under a fake name. By the time anyone traced her route, she'd be gone again, vanished into the fabric of America where even Dante Castellano's long reach couldn't find her. Ms. Carter, the older lawyer, Richard Moss, Dante's head counsel for the past 20 years, stood, gesturing to a chair across from them. "Please, sit. Can we get you anything? Water? Coffee?" Water would be fine. Her mouth felt like sandpaper, her tongue thick and clumsy. Richard nodded to the assistant, who disappeared and returned moments later with a crystal glass of water with lemon, served on a small silver tray because even hydration had to be luxurious in Dante's world. Emma took it gratefully, letting the cool liquid soothe her parched throat. The baby shifted again, pressing against her ribs, reminding her why she was here, why she'd risked everything to come back. A birth certificate. Legal documentation. A father's name, even if he'd never be a father in any way that mattered. Now then, Richard opened a leather folder, revealing a stack of documents that represented the end of everything Emma had once believed in. "These are the final divorce papers. As you can see, Mr. Castellano has been exceptionally generous with the settlement. The apartment on Lakeshore Drive, fully paid. A trust fund that will provide you with $50,000 monthly for life. Access to—" "I don't want his money," Emma interrupted, her voice sharper than intended, edged with something that might have been anger or might have been grief. "I told you that from the beginning. I just want the divorce finalized. I just want to be free." A brief, uncomfortable silence fell. The 2 lawyers exchanged glances that spoke volumes, the kind of looks people give each other when they think someone is making a terrible mistake but aren't allowed to say so. Ms. Carter, the younger lawyer, a woman with severe features and calculating eyes, leaned forward. "You should understand that turning down this settlement would be—" "I don't care what it would be," Emma said firmly, straightening in her chair despite the ache in her lower back. "I didn't marry him for his money. I'm not divorcing him for his money. I just want this over." Richard's expression softened slightly, and for a moment, Emma saw something almost like sympathy in his eyes. "Emma," he said, dropping the formality, using the gentle tone she remembered from before, from the early days when Dante had first introduced them and Richard had seemed almost like a kindly uncle figure. "You've been gone for 2 years. In all that time, Dante never stopped looking for you. He's asked us repeatedly if we'd heard from you, if there was any news, any trace. When you finally contacted me about the divorce, he agreed immediately to whatever terms you wanted. This settlement isn't about buying you. It's about making sure you're taken care of." Something twisted in Emma's chest at those words, taken care of, because she knew exactly what that meant in Dante's world. The baby kicked again, harder this time, and Emma had to bite back a gasp, had to force her face to remain neutral even as pain shot through her side. Taken care of. If Dante knew about the baby, his definition of "taken care of" would mean something very different. It would mean a gilded cage lined with bodyguards and security details. It would mean raising their daughter in a world of violence and blood money, where every friend was a potential threat and every moment outside their fortress was a calculated risk. It would mean watching her little girl grow up the way Dante had, learning to spot lies before learning to read, understanding the weight of a gun before understanding the weight of responsibility, knowing that her last name made her both powerful and perpetually at risk. No. Emma had escaped that life once. She'd do whatever it took to keep her daughter free of it. "Just show me where to sign," she said quietly, proud that her voice didn't shake. Richard hesitated, studying her face as if trying to read the secrets written there. Then he slid the documents across the table along with an expensive pen, black lacquer with gold trim, the kind of pen that cost what Emma used to earn in a month at the diner. Emma pulled the papers closer, scanning the legal language that all seemed to blur together. Dissolution of marriage. Irreconcilable differences. Division of assets. Waiver of claims. That last one made her stomach clench. Buried in the legal jargon was a clause about biological children of the marriage. By signing, Dante would unknowingly waive all parental rights to any children. It was the protection Emma needed, the safety net that would keep him from claiming their daughter even if he eventually discovered the truth. "Forgive me," she thought, though she wasn't sure if the apology was meant for Dante or for their unborn child. She was on the 7th page, hands shaking slightly as she signed each designated line, when she heard it. Footsteps in the hallway. Confident. Measured. Familiar. A cadence she'd recognize anywhere, even after 2 years, even in her sleep. Emma's pen froze mid-signature. Her head snapped up, eyes wide, meeting Richard's suddenly guilty expression. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, and there was genuine regret in his voice. He insisted on being here. "I tried to." The conference room doors swung open. And there he was. Dante Castellano walked into the room like he owned it, which, technically, he did. He owned the building. The company. Probably half the city. But it wasn't ownership that made every eye in the room turn toward him like flowers following the sun. It wasn't money or power or influence. It was presence. Pure, undeniable, overwhelming presence. He'd always had it, that quality that made him impossible to ignore. 6'3" of lean muscle wrapped in a custom charcoal suit that probably cost more than a car. Dark hair perfectly styled, sharp jawline that could cut glass, and those eyes, gray like storm clouds, capable of either fury or tenderness depending on the moment. And right now, those eyes were scanning the room with laser focus, moving across the lawyers, the furniture, the windows, until they found what they were searching for. Her. Emma's breath caught in her throat, trapped there by the sheer force of seeing him again after so long. 2 years. It had been 2 years since she'd seen him, and the impact of his presence hit her like a physical force, like walking into a wall she hadn't seen coming. She'd forgotten, or maybe forced herself to forget, how beautiful he was. How dangerous. How the simple act of him entering a room could change the entire atmosphere, could make the air feel charged with electricity. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop spinning. Then his gaze dropped lower. Emma saw the exact moment he noticed. She was standing now, when had she stood, and the coat that had seemed so concealing in her apartment mirror suddenly felt transparent. The way she was angled, one hand unconsciously protective over her belly, the unmistakable curve visible even through the heavy fabric. The color drained from Dante's face. "Everyone out," he said, his voice deadly quiet, the kind of quiet that preceded explosions. The lawyers scrambled to their feet like students dismissed by a strict teacher. Papers shuffled, chairs scraped, briefcases snapped shut with nervous efficiency. Richard opened his mouth, perhaps to protest, perhaps to mediate, perhaps to remind Dante that this was supposed to be a simple legal proceeding, but the look Dante shot him could have frozen fire in mid-burn. Within seconds, the conference room was empty except for Emma and Dante, the door clicking shut behind the retreating legal team with a finality that made Emma's heart pound against her ribs. Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating, filled with 2 years of questions and pain and longing and anger. Dante took one step forward. Emma took one step back, her spine hitting the window behind her. "Is it mine?" His voice was rough, like gravel and broken glass, like a man who'd been holding back a scream for so long that his vocal cords had forgotten how to shape normal sounds. Emma's hand tightened over her belly, protective, maternal, fierce. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to run, to flee, to find an escape route. But there was nowhere to go. She was 32 floors up with the only exit blocked by 6 feet of dangerous, devastated man. Emma. He said her name like a prayer and a curse, like something holy and profane all at once. "Answer me. Is that baby mine?" She lifted her chin, forcing herself to meet his eyes, forcing steel into her spine even as her knees threatened to buckle. "It doesn't matter." "The hell it doesn't." The words exploded from him, and Emma flinched despite herself. Immediately, Dante's expression shifted, anguish replacing anger, horror replacing fury. He held up his hands, stepping back, giving her space. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, desperately. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." He dragged his hands through his perfectly styled hair, destroying it, making him look suddenly younger, more vulnerable, more like the man she'd fallen in love with instead of the Mafia boss everyone feared. "Just tell me. Please." That please broke something inside her. She'd heard Dante command. Heard him demand. Heard him order men twice his size to do things that would haunt her nightmares. She'd heard him threaten and promise in the same breath. But she'd rarely, so very rarely, heard him beg. "Yes," she whispered, the word barely more than breath. "She's yours." She. Dante's voice cracked on the word, split down the middle like wood under an axe. "A daughter." He moved then, crossing the distance between them in 3 long strides, and Emma tensed, every muscle in her body preparing for, what? She didn't know. Didn't know what to expect from this man who was both familiar and strange, both the love of her life and the danger she'd spent 2 years fleeing. But he didn't grab her. Didn't trap her. Didn't do any of the things her panicked mind had imagined. He stopped just inches away, his eyes fixed on her belly like it held the secrets of the universe, like it was the most precious thing he'd ever seen. "Can I?" He raised one hand, hovering near her coat, trembling slightly. "May I?" Emma knew she should say no. Knew she should maintain the distance, keep the walls up, protect herself and her daughter from the inevitable heartbreak of getting too close. But the look on his face, the raw wonder and pain and desperate hope, shattered her resolve like glass. She nodded. With trembling fingers, Dante unbuttoned her coat. Emma let it fall open, revealing the simple dress beneath that couldn't hide her pregnancy, that showed the full swell of her belly, the undeniable evidence of the life growing inside her. His hands settled over the curve, large and warm and impossibly gentle. For a moment, they both stood frozen, barely breathing, existing in a bubble of suspended time where nothing else mattered, not the past, not the future, not the empire of violence and blood money that had driven them apart. Then the baby kicked. Dante jerked like he'd been shocked, his eyes flying to Emma's face, wide with wonder. "Was that?" "She's active today," Emma said quietly, unable to stop the small smile that tugged at her lips despite everything. "Probably can sense my stress." "Our daughter." Dante breathed the words like a revelation, like a prayer, like the answer to a question he hadn't known he was asking. "We're having a daughter." His other hand came up, cradling her belly from both sides now, holding her, holding them, with a tenderness that made Emma's throat tight with unshed tears. The wonder in his voice nearly undid her completely. "This. This was why she'd run. Not because she didn't love him, but because she loved him too much. Loved him enough to know that he would never willingly let her go if he knew about the baby. Loved him enough to believe he deserved better than the life he'd been living, even if he couldn't see it himself. Loved him enough to hope that maybe, someday, he could be free of the darkness that surrounded him. But she'd also known, with the terrible clarity that comes from watching someone you love bleed out on the pavement, that as long as he was Dante Castellano, head of the most powerful crime family in Chicago, their daughter would never be safe. Never be free. Never be just a normal child with a normal life. How far along? Dante asked, his hand still cradling her belly like it was made of spun glass. 32 weeks. When did you find out? After I left. His jaw tightened, muscle jumping beneath the skin. And you didn't think I deserved to know? It wasn't a question, but Emma answered anyway. I thought she deserved to grow up alive, she shot back, her voice stronger now, fueled by 2 years of fear and determination and love so fierce it burned. I thought she deserved a chance at a normal life. Not bodyguards and safe houses and wondering which of Daddy's enemies might try to hurt her to get to him. Dante flinched like she'd slapped him, but he didn't let go, didn't remove his hands from their protective position over their daughter. I would have protected you, he said hoarsely. Both of you. I would have. Like you protected yourself? Emma's voice broke, the words tumbling out on a wave of grief she'd been holding back for 2 years. Like you protected Marco? The name hung in the air between them like a ghost. Marco Russo. Dante's best friend since childhood. His most trusted lieutenant. The man who'd laughed at their wedding, who'd been the first to congratulate them, who'd promised Emma he'd always keep Dante safe. The man who'd been gunned down in the street 2 years and 3 months ago, killed by a rival family sending a message, blood spreading across the pavement in a pool so red it looked black under the streetlights. Emma had been there. She'd seen it happen. Seen Marco fall. Seen Dante roar and rage and hold his friend's body while sirens wailed in the distance and Emma stood frozen, realizing with horrible clarity that this was her future, watching everyone Dante loved die, one by one, until eventually, inevitably, the bullet found her. Or worse, found their child. That night, she'd realized the truth that love had been hiding from her. Loving Dante Castellano meant watching everyone around him die. It meant living with a target painted on her back. And she could survive that for herself, could choose to accept that risk because she was an adult who'd made her choices. But not for a child. Never for a child. That's why you left, Dante said quietly. It wasn't a question. Marco's death. That was when I knew I had to, Emma confirmed, her voice barely above a whisper. But I'd been planning it since our wedding day. When your uncle pulled me aside and told me exactly what kind of man I'd married. When he explained in graphic detail what happened to the wives and children of men in your position. When he showed me the photos. Don't. Dante's voice turned sharp, dangerous. Whatever Vittorio told you, whatever he showed you, was the truth, Emma finished, meeting his eyes steadily. You know it was. Children kidnapped and ransomed. Wives murdered to send messages. Families destroyed because of business deals gone wrong. That's your world, Dante. That's the legacy you're part of. Was part of, Dante said fiercely, his hands tightening on her belly, not painfully, but possessively, desperately. Was. Past tense. Emma, I've changed things. The organization is different now. Cleaner. Legitimate businesses. Legal operations. I've been. Money laundering is still illegal even if the restaurant serving as fronts are real, Emma interrupted, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. We've been transitioning. To what? Respectability? Emma laughed, but there was no humor in it, only exhaustion and grief. You can't transition out of what you are. The Castellano family has been running this city for 3 generations. You think you can just walk away because you want to play house? Yes. The single word stopped her cold. Yes, Dante repeated, and there was steel in his voice now, determination, fierce promise. If that's what it takes to have you, to have our daughter, then yes. I'll walk away from all of it. Emma stared at him, searching his face for the lie, for the manipulation, for the angle he was playing. But she saw only terrible, devastating sincerity. You don't mean that, she whispered. Try me. He finally released her belly, only to cup her face between his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes, to see the truth burning there. Emma, listen to me. I've spent 2 years looking for you. 2 years wondering if you were alive or dead, safe or suffering. 2 years of absolute hell knowing you'd left me and not understanding why. Now I know. And you're right, you were right to be afraid. But I'm offering you a choice. Give me a chance to prove things can be different. Let me show you that I can build something better for you, for our daughter, for us. Dante. 1 month, he interrupted, desperation creeping into his voice. Stay for 1 month. Let me take care of you. Make sure you and the baby are healthy and safe. If at the end of that time you still want to leave, I'll let you go. I'll sign whatever papers you want, give you whatever resources you need, and I won't look for you again. I swear it. But please, please, don't run away with my child without giving me a chance to be a father. Emma wanted to refuse. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was a mistake, that she should grab her coat and run and never look back. But her body was exhausted from 2 years of running. Her heart ached with loneliness and fear that had been her only companions. And the baby was moving insistently against Dante's palm, as if she could sense her father's presence, as if even in the womb she recognized the voice that was begging for a chance. For weeks, she heard herself say, the words coming from somewhere deep inside, from the part of her that still loved him, that had never stopped loving him despite everything. But I need to see real change, Dante. Not promises. Not plans. Actual, concrete evidence that you're serious about leaving that life behind. You'll have it, Dante promised immediately. Then, slowly, giving her time to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his forehead against hers, their breath mingling in the space between them. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this chance. I won't waste it. They stood like that for a long moment, 2 people who'd once loved each other desperately, trying to find their way back through 2 years of hurt and fear and separation. Finally, Emma pulled away. I need to sit down, she admitted, one hand going to her lower back. My back is killing me. Immediately, Dante's hands were on her shoulders, guiding her toward a chair with such careful tenderness it made her throat tight with emotion. When was your last doctor's appointment? He asked, concern evident in every line of his face. 3 weeks ago. Everything was fine. You need a new doctor. The best in the city. I'll have my assistant. Dante. Emma caught his hand, stopping him mid-sentence. No assistants. No security details checking up on me. No guards following me to appointments. If I'm staying, I need some autonomy. Some privacy. She watched him struggle with that, saw the war in his eyes between his need to protect and his desire to give her what she needed. Finally, slowly, he nodded. Okay. But you have to promise me you'll be careful. That you'll let me know where you're going and when you'll be back. Not because I'm controlling you, because I need to know you're safe. I can do that, Emma agreed quietly. Dante pulled out his phone, typing rapidly with the practiced efficiency of a man who ran an empire from his fingertips. I'm having my driver bring the car around. We'll go to the penthouse. You can have your own room, your own space, whatever you need. I have an apartment, Emma said quietly. Where? His tone sharpened despite his obvious effort to remain calm, and Emma recognized that edge, the Mafia boss surfacing beneath the concerned father-to-be. Emma hesitated. She'd been so careful not to leave a trail, paying cash for everything, using fake names, changing her appearance. But one look at Dante's face told her that he'd find out anyway. He had resources she couldn't begin to match, resources that could track a ghost through smoke. Pilsen, she admitted finally. A studio above a bodega. Dante's jaw tightened, muscle jumping beneath the skin. But to his credit, he didn't comment on the neighborhood, one of the rougher areas of the city, far from the safe, wealthy enclaves where men like him operated. We'll send someone to pack up your things and bring them to the penthouse. You shouldn't be climbing stairs in your condition. It's only 2 flights. Emma. His voice was gentle but firm, the voice of a man who'd made a decision and wouldn't be swayed. Let me take care of you. Please. You've been doing everything alone for so long. Let me help. And there it was, the core of Dante that had made her fall in love with him in the first place. Beneath the dangerous exterior, beneath the ruthless reputation and the blood-stained legacy, there was a man who cared so deeply it sometimes seemed to overwhelm him. A man who protected what was his with fierce devotion. A man who, despite everything, genuinely wanted to do right by the people he loved. The problem had always been that his methods of protection, his definition of doing right, involved violence and intimidation and operating outside the law. Could he really change that? Emma wondered, studying his face. Could a man like Dante Castellano truly walk away from the empire he'd inherited and built? She didn't know. But as she felt the baby move again, strong and insistent against her ribs, she realized she had to find out. Not just for herself, but for their daughter. Every child deserved to know their father. And every father deserved a chance to be better than his worst choices. Okay, she said quietly. Let's go to the penthouse. The drive through Chicago's downtown streets felt surreal. Emma sat in the back of Dante's town car, armor-plated, she noticed, with bulletproof glass, watching the city slide past like scenes from someone else's life. Dante sat beside her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his presence like heat from a fire. When did you know? He asked quietly, breaking the silence. About the pregnancy. 6 weeks after I left, Emma admitted, the memory flooding back with painful clarity. I was in Detroit, working at a diner. I kept getting sick during the morning shift. One of the other waitresses figured it out before I did. Detroit. Dante's voice was carefully neutral, but Emma could hear the pain beneath it. You were that close. For 2 months. Then I went to Cleveland. Then Pittsburgh. Then Richmond. She didn't mention the dozen other cities, the constantly changing names and appearances, the paranoia that had become her constant companion, the nights she'd woken up certain she heard footsteps outside her door. I kept moving. Kept waiting for you to find me. I looked, Dante said, pain evident in every syllable. I had people searching everywhere. But you were smart. No credit cards, no phone, no digital footprint. It was like you'd vanished into thin air. That was the idea. Why come back now? His eyes found hers in the dimming light. Why risk contacting Richard about the divorce? Emma was quiet for a long moment, one hand resting on her belly, feeling their daughter move beneath her palm. Because she deserves a birth certificate with her father's name on it, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Because even if I never wanted you to know about her, even if I planned to raise her alone, I couldn't bring myself to erase you completely. You have a right to be acknowledged as her father. Even if, her voice caught, even if you couldn't be part of her life. Dante turned to look at her fully, and Emma was startled to see tears gathering in his eyes, threatening to spill over. You were going to let me sign away my parental rights without knowing I was doing it, he said hoarsely, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. The divorce papers. That clause about waiving all claims to any biological children of the marriage. You were going to trick me into giving up our daughter. Guilt twisted in Emma's stomach because he was right. That had been exactly the plan. Get the divorce finalized, let Dante unknowingly sign away his rights, then disappear one final time with legal protection that would prevent him from claiming their daughter even if he eventually found out about her. I was trying to protect her, Emma whispered. From me? The anguish in Dante's voice cut like a knife through her heart. You were trying to protect our child from her own father? From your world, Emma corrected, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Not from you. Never from you, Dante. But from the life you lead. The enemies you've made. The violence that follows you everywhere like a shadow. I couldn't, her voice broke completely. I couldn't watch our baby grow up afraid. I couldn't live wondering every day if this would be the day someone decided to hurt her to get to you. The car pulled up to a high-rise tower in the Gold Coast neighborhood, one of the most expensive addresses in the city. The driver, a massive man with alert eyes and a bulge under his jacket that spoke of concealed weapons, opened the door and offered Emma his hand. Thank you, she murmured, accepting his help. The baby's weight had shifted lower in the past hour, pressing against her pelvis in a way that made walking uncomfortable. Dante noticed immediately, his hand going to the small of her back, supporting her without being asked. The penthouse was everything Emma expected and nothing she was prepared for. 30 floors up, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city that took her breath away. Modern furniture in neutral tones, expensive art on the walls, a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine. But what caught her attention was the second bedroom. I had it prepared while we were in the car, Dante said quietly, watching her face. If you hate it, we can change everything. Emma walked into the room and stopped, her hand flying to her mouth. It was a nursery. Not just any nursery, but a dream of a nursery. Soft gray walls with white trim. A crib that looked like it cost more than a month's rent. A rocking chair by the window. Shelves already lined with books and soft toys. A changing table. A wardrobe. Everything a baby could need. Everything Emma had been too afraid to buy for herself, too superstitious to prepare, too uncertain of her future to invest in. When, she whispered. I made a call from the conference room, Dante admitted. While the lawyers were leaving. I have people who can accomplish miracles when properly motivated. Emma turned to look at him, this dangerous man who just created a perfect nursery in under 2 hours, and felt something shift inside her chest. Dante, I can't. You don't have to say anything, he interrupted gently. Just know that whether you stay or go after the month is up, this room will always be here. Waiting. Just in case. The first week was the hardest. Emma moved through Dante's penthouse like a ghost, uncertain of her place, waiting for the other shoe to drop. She kept waiting for the bodyguards to appear, for the restrictions to start, for Dante to reveal this was all manipulation. But it didn't happen. Instead, Dante gave her space. He worked from home, conducting business from his office, but always made time for her. Breakfast together. Dinner when she felt up to it. Quiet evenings where they talked about nothing important, books, movies, memories from before everything fell apart. He never pushed. Never demanded. Never tried to touch her beyond the occasional supportive hand when she struggled to stand. The second week, Emma started to relax. Dante took her to doctor's appointments, not with an entourage, but just the two of them. He sat in the waiting room, reading pregnancy books she'd never seen him acquire. He asked the doctor questions Emma had been too afraid to ask. He held her hand during the ultrasound, tears streaming down his face as he watched their daughter move on the screen. She has your nose, he whispered, and Emma had to laugh because their daughter was barely more than a blob on the grainy image. But she understood what he meant. He was falling in love. Not just with Emma, but with the idea of them, the family they could be. The third week brought revelations. Emma woke one morning to find Dante in his office, surrounded by legal documents. "What are you doing?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. Dante looked up, and there was something different in his eyes. Something lighter. "Transferring assets," he said simply. "Liquidating certain businesses. Signing over others to people I trust. By the end of the month, I'll be out. Completely." Emma's breath caught. "Dante, you can't just." "I can," he interrupted, standing, crossing to her. "I should have done it years ago. The only thing that kept me in was fear of what would happen if I left, fear of appearing weak, fear of disappointing my father's memory. But I'm more afraid of losing you. Of losing her. So I'm choosing you. I'm choosing our family." He pulled out another document, placing it in Emma's hands. It was a deed. To a house. In a quiet suburb an hour outside Chicago. 5 bedrooms, Dante said quietly. Good schools nearby. A yard for her to play in. Far enough from the city that my past won't follow us, but close enough that we can visit if we want. I bought it this morning. It's in your name. Yours alone. So even if you decide to leave me, you and our daughter will have somewhere safe to go. Emma stared at the document, then at Dante, then back at the deed. "You're serious," she whispered. "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." The fourth week, Emma made her decision. The birth. It happened 3 days before the month ended. Emma woke at 2 a.m. to wetness and cramping, and by the time they reached the hospital, contractions were coming every 5 minutes. Dante never left her side. Not when the pain got bad. Not when she screamed at him that this was his fault. Not when the hours stretched on and exhaustion made her want to quit. He held her hand. Whispered encouragement. Reminded her how strong she was, how brave, how much he loved her. And at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, their daughter entered the world. Small. Perfect. Screaming her displeasure at the cold, bright room. The nurse placed her on Emma's chest, and Emma looked down at the tiny face, Dante's eyes, her nose, a shock of dark hair, and felt her entire world shift. "Sophia," she whispered, the name she'd been holding secret for months. "Her name is Sophia." Dante, standing beside the bed with tears streaming openly down his face, leaned down to kiss Emma's forehead. "Sophia Castellano," he breathed. "She's perfect. You're perfect. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this." Emma looked up at him, this dangerous man who'd become gentle, this mafia boss who'd become a father, this criminal who'd chosen redemption, and made her choice. "We're staying," she said quietly. "Not for a month. Not temporarily. We're staying, Dante. All of us. Together." His eyes widened, hope and disbelief warring on his face. "You mean?" "I mean I love you. I never stopped loving you. And our daughter deserves to know her father. The real you. The man who'd burn his empire to the ground for his family. That's the man I want her to grow up with." Dante's response was to kiss her, deep and tender and full of promise, while their daughter made small snuffling noises between them. The house in the suburbs had a swing set in the backyard. Emma sat on the porch, watching Dante push their daughter, still too small for the swing, but delighted by the gentle motion, while autumn leaves fell around them in shades of gold and red. He'd kept his promises. All of them. The Castellano empire had been dismantled piece by piece, sold off or signed over, until all that remained were legitimate businesses that Dante managed from a home office. No more late-night calls. No more bodyguards. No more looking over their shoulders. Just a family. Normal. Safe. Free. Sophia giggled, a sound that never failed to make Emma's heart swell, and Dante's face lit up with such pure joy that Emma had to blink back tears. This was what she'd run for. What she'd sacrificed for. What she'd been afraid was impossible. A life where love was stronger than legacy. Where a man could choose peace over power. Where a child could grow up knowing her father not as a dangerous criminal, but as the man who read her bedtime stories and made funny faces and loved her mother with quiet devotion. Dante looked up, catching Emma's eye across the yard, and smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. And Emma smiled back, one hand resting on her stomach where, impossibly, miraculously, another tiny heartbeat had begun. Some secrets, she'd learned, were worth keeping. But some truths were worth fighting for. And some love stories were written not in blood and violence, but in the quiet moments of redemption, second chances, and the courage to change. If this story touched your heart, if Emma and Dante's journey moved you, I need you to do 3 things. Hit that like button, let me know this story resonated with you. Drop a comment, tell me, what would you have done in Emma's situation? Would you have given Dante a second chance? Or would you have run and never looked back? I want to hear your thoughts. Subscribe to this channel, because everyone deserves stories about love that challenges us, redemption that costs something, and second chances that change everything. We share stories like this every week, and I don't want you to miss a single one. Life lesson. The most powerful choice we can make is not to run from love because it's complicated, but to stay and fight for it when it's worth saving. Emma could have stayed hidden forever. She could have raised Sofia alone, safe in her secrecy. But she chose to give Dante a chance, not because he deserved it based on his past, but because people deserve the opportunity to become who they're meant to be. Dante could have used his power to force Emma to stay. Could have manipulated, controlled, or intimidated her into compliance. But he chose to prove himself through action, to dismantle his empire brick by brick, to show rather than tell that love mattered more than legacy. Here's what we can learn. For those who've been hurt, safety is important, but don't let fear of the past steal your future. Sometimes people do change. Sometimes love is worth the risk of believing again. For those who've caused hurt, words are easy. Promises are cheap. If you truly want redemption, it comes through consistent action over time. Change isn't declared, it's demonstrated, day after day, choice after choice. For everyone, the greatest inheritance we can give our children isn't money or power or legacy. It's the example of choosing love over fear, peace over violence, and family over everything else. Dante's father left him an empire. Dante will leave Sofia something far more valuable, proof that it's never too late to become a better person. That love can redeem even the darkest past. That the chains of legacy can be broken by the courage to choose differently.